can just shoot a picture, but to me, like, if I'm looking at it from cinematic, that can be the subject.
So if you've been watching the live stream, you know that we've said it a couple of times. We wanted to do something a little bit different on occasion with this channel. Instead of it just being tech driven, we're not really even view driven. If we get 100 views or 10 views or 1 view or a million views, doesn't really matter as much. We wanted to make some content that might inspire you or challenge you or, you know, tickle your creative fancy. It's Memorial Day weekend. It's actually after that now, but I had spent it down with my parents at their beach home, which has a weird sort of energy whenever I go to it because I'm sitting in the room that to me is kind of significant of a lot of stuff that happened in my life prior to the film side of things really taking off. So Sarah and I were freshly married. I lost my contract at a company. We were forced to move. I found a job in Missouri. So we moved to Columbia, Missouri, where I worked for a company that was an online retailer. I did their marketing. Side note, one day we're gonna have Mr. Pickles on this show. Here's a photograph. This is Mr. Pickles. That's the only photograph I have of him. He is hands down one of the most talented individuals I've ever met. We'll sidebar that for another conversation. While I was up there, I started freelancing, and on the side, I started doing grip work, and the grip work landed me into a spot of doing, working on a music video, and that music video tied me into meeting a production company. That production company was run by a guy named David, and we hit it off really well. We got along very well. We had a very much like me and Jeff style relationship. Now, it should surprise you that I'm going to interrupt myself here real quick and talk about my time in Missouri and the relationship I had with David. David was really close. I love the guy, I still do. Don't get to talk to him anymore, but whatever was there was awesome. Tremendously powerful filmmaker, wonderful human being. This is me and David, and you know, we were just chums. Like beer, hit it off. We both were into brewing. I mean, when Jeff wasn't in my life in that time, David filled that void, and now that Jeff is back, Jeff fills his own void, if you will. He's back in. So it's just one of those things, but it was a blessing to meet David, to be inspired, and to really push myself because he left a major creative mark. So something that I thought was tragic, me losing my job in the beginning, to move me to Missouri. David and I connected really well. So they essentially poached me. I came to work for them. They were attached to an ad agency. That ad agency made me director of corporate media, whatever that means, because I guess I had a lot of suits or something. So I did that for a while, and pretty soon we blew up the business, and we were really just helping them grow. We ended up getting bumped to co-VP. So David and myself became the VPs of production for this agency, and we ran that for a while, at which point through a series of events that I don't even fully understand, because that's what life is. I don't know what I did. I did not do anything illegal. I did not do anything negative, but somewhere my contract was not renewed. My relationship with them ended very abruptly, very aggressively, very negatively, including damaging my relationship with David. So it was a really brutal situation. Packed our stuff up, and Sarah and I were forced to move. We didn't have kids yet. We just had our 2 dogs. So we packed up, we moved back to Alabama, but we had no place to live. We barely had any possessions to our name. And so we ended up moving into this room, which is at my parents' beach house, which is 45 minutes from the closest city, on an island that's bare, and there's no one here during the winter, which is when we were here. The dogs lived outside because they couldn't live inside. They just ran around the porch, pooping everywhere, which meant we had to do poop duty. So it was a whole big thing, and this is where we were. This is where we lived for 4 to 6 months. I got your phone right here, Sarah. Wife calling me. Can't be a thing without her calling. Here's your phone. We would take a ferry at 6 months on, or take this 45-minute ferry if it worked. If it wasn't working, I'd have to drive an hour and a half to 2 hours around. It was a total nightmare. I got a sick kid. I got puke on my shoulder. Somewhere right here. It smells of vomit. Point is, you can push forward. You never know what life's going to throw at you. And despite this being a very simple, small little room in which I lived, it changed a whole lot in my life. So that's kind of a lesson in and of itself to me, is that no matter how positive or negative something can be, sometimes you just literally have to look at it from a storytelling perspective of, is this the third act? Living there forced me to think differently. Again, no kids, so I pushed. I hit up as many contacts as I could to try and get work. I hustled like a madman, and that ended up leading me to a conversation with a former employer who wanted me to make movies. or they wanted to make movies. They hired me to shoot. Here's a couple of those shots from that. But they hired me to shoot this film, this little bitty indie film. It was a complete crazy experience, but they also realized they didn't want to be in the film side, so they kind of just dumped it onto my lap and said, you run it, you go with it, but there's some conditions, and they set those up. Like, we had, certain stories we had to tell and all that. But through that, I persevered. Again, it was a positive because I was directing movies. It was a negative because they weren't my movies necessarily, if you want to call that a negative. Eventually, it landed me into a spot of doing my own, which was Convergence. I lost a friend, and he passed away from cancer. It triggered me to write a script, blah, blah, blah. It led to this whole thing. And, the biggest part of Convergence is I worked with a ton of cool people prior to it. But then I got to work with guys like Klain, Michael T., Ethan Embry. They're up on the screen somewhere in these photos. I got to work with my friends over the courses of these films. I made new friends. I've built relationships off of that. The big takeaway for me, just on a very personal, selfish level, is that I finally got to score a film. That was a dream of mine. I didn't want to do the work. I'm not a musician in that capacity. But I finally got to as a director, go watch an orchestra, right? Sit there and play the music to the picture that I helped create. And that was a major turning point. I had not ever thought that would happen to me, and the only way that it did, aside from divine intervention itself, was the fact that I persevered despite the odds. I pushed myself creatively in every way, and that also meant learning beyond just what camera to use or what piece of editing software. I figured out producing. I started studying budgets, so I knew exactly where we were at all times because I had a goal, which was to get the movie scored. And the only way I could get that done is by understanding every facet of production, not just honing in on one selfish little side. I had to know everyone's spot so that I could not only just help as a director and lead, but I could also help maintain the budget so that I knew that the battle was uphill for me to get a chance to score. Nobody scores $1 million movie. It just doesn't happen. But we did it, and we did it well, and I'm very proud of it, and it's one of the greatest moments of my life. That's what this photo is. It's me and producer Scott Robinson. We fought, and we made it happen, and we produced that picture. Big darn deal for me, personally. Again, going back to, I thought I'd lost everything when I lost my job, and in turn, I hadn't. What I'd lost was the things holding me back. So I just want to encourage you to consider pushing out as hard as you can in any capacity, even if there's little side, it's like a tributary filling a river, right? If there's little tributaries coming out and you get sidelined and lost in that, but your goal is eventually make it to the big ass ocean, then keep paddling. Eventually you'll make it to the big ass ocean. You might even double back on yourself, but you can do it and get to that spot. So again, we wanted to do something different. That's what this is. It's a weird video. Don't really care about like anything more than wanting to encourage you, and just felt really motivated. Sitting in the room where I thought my career and my life was over made me think of you guys and think of the fact that I wouldn't be here without your help. But further, I wouldn't be here if I didn't push on. So I just want to encourage you, if anybody out there struggling, or you're feeling challenged creatively, emotionally, narratively, whatever, technologically, no! Then just go for it. Go for what you got to do. Don't let things hinder you. Keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing. All right, we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Got you.